Hello, everyone. I'm Dominique.
And I'm Christina, and we are the Connected in Glass podcast.
Every week, we will feature interviews with glass artists who speak to their creative processes and overcoming challenges.
These conversations are real and raw. We hope that by sharing these stories, you're able to find some connection and know that you're not alone. If you love this podcast and want to help support its creation, please consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/connectedinglass. Also, please consider joining our Facebook group, Connected in Glass Podcast, where you can continue following the artists that we've interviewed in previous episodes. Today, we're interviewing Ed Branson. Ed is from Massachusetts. He's been working in furnace glass since 1976 and working full-time in the glass world since 1982.
Hi.
Hi.
Thanks for being here with us.
You're welcome. Thanks for inviting me.
We're so excited to get to know you, and we just wanted to start with the basics, maybe skip the glass part of your life for now. Tell us where you live, what you enjoy besides glass, and then bring us into what you do for a living.
Okay. So I guess I'll briefly start at the beginning, which is I was born in North Carolina, and I lived there until I was 12. And I know the big things I brought out of living there were close connection to my extended family and a real appreciation for farmers. And they became like an idol to me. And I learned that I love hard work. I remember I was like 7 years old. I went into our backyard and dug up this huge area to plant a vegetable garden. And I mean, it wasn't successful, but I just like doing hard work. And the other thing I know I brought out of those 12 years was my love for turtles. And then we moved to New Jersey, and I went through high school. I never thought of myself as an artist. I took one ceramics class during high school years. I took a couple of woodshop classes, and I really enjoyed those. Then came college, and I still never thought about being an artist. I took one ceramics class in college, and then I ended up majoring in religion, thinking that I really thought I would be working in the social service area and being a counselor of some kind. And but then I knew I liked to make things. I really liked that woodshop class, and I liked making things, and I liked just like working hard and sweating. And so it's when I was a junior in college, they had a program where you could go to Vermont and work for a variety of people in Vermont, and you would get credit for it to learn a whole bunch of new kind of things. And one of the guys that I worked for was a glassblower, and that was the first time I experienced it. And it was really an old school shop, like dirt floors and brick ovens and Venturi burners, so it was loud and really crude. And that was the 1976 time. But I still never thought of it as a career. I guess I sort of was pretty good at it, but I still didn't think of it as a career. Then I finished college, and I was really trying to figure out what I was going to do with my life. I did carpentry for a couple of years, and I still thought I was going to go into some kind of counseling career. And then I bumped into somebody who saw some pictures of the things I made back in Vermont. And they said to me, you know what? I think you might be able to make a living at this. And I was shocked. I had no idea that what I had done so far could actually produce a living. And so I thought about that. I went around and visited some shops. And then at some point, I just said, I'm going to go for it. And it was like a dream. And I left the social service idea behind. And I got a job working for Josh Simpson, and that was a great experience. I worked there for 5 years because it was great training on how to run a business, because his business was so small then that there were just a couple of us that worked for him. And so while I was there, I got to pay bills for him, and I was in charge of his accounts receivable. We built furnaces, we built ovens, we blew glass, we did grinding, we went to shows. And I felt like when I left there, like I knew the basics of how to run a glass craft business. And I really, I still tell him how much I appreciated that. And it was just sort of luck, because after that, his business grew and grew. And I don't think they have that kind of experience anymore. I think so. After that, I left Josh's in 1987, and I started a shop in a small barn next to our house in Massachusetts. And I still did not think of myself as an artist. And I actually, one of the reasons I chose to go in this direction was because I thought it would give me a lifestyle that I wanted, that my wife and I could live in the country, and I could be self-employed, and I would get to learn hand skills. And as a glass blower, at least back then, you had to know electricity and plumbing and the whole skill set. And it was similar to what I saw with farmers. My grandfather was a dairy farmer, and I just thought, man, he knows how to do everything that really matters. And so I started my own shop and went to wholesale shows primarily, and it did work. That guy was right. It did work. I mean, it took like a year to sort of get things going, but after that, the shop supported me and my family until COVID came, and I'm really grateful for that. But after about 10 years there, I started to need more room because I wanted to grow. I wanted my work to grow, and I already had assistants and people helping me grind and pack, but I wanted to be able to do more than that. And luckily, a barn in town became available and was just such a perfect place to put a glass shop. So I did. In 1997, I moved from my little shop over to my big shop, and that's where I am now. And I feel so lucky to have this place and have some pretty good equipment. And for most of the years of my business, it really was primarily a wholesale business. And but the market has changed so much since I started. Now there's all kinds of ways to sell glass, and I'm exploring all of them at the moment.
Did you find your voice in glass immediately, or how has it evolved from there? Like, you left Josh's and he has a certain style. How did you find your own way?
I think I should look her up. I went to the gas conference in like 1984 or something like that. It was at Corning, and I remember hearing a critic, an art critic, talk about how with glass, she felt like it was a mistake to turn glass into something that's not. Why make a piece of glass look like ceramics? Or, why you should be, if you're working with glass, you should use its natural qualities. And that was sort of the beginning of me finding my voice. Was like, yeah, I do love that. I love the liquid nature of glass. And could I get that to hold up and be a part of the final piece? So somebody looks at it and can tell, like, oh, that I can sell that was in a liquid form before. But I remember, like, I went to Pilchuck in 97, And it wasn't long after that that I started like saying to myself, Ed, I think you're an artist now. It sort of I grew into it. And another interesting thing that helped me find my voice, this is sort of a strange story, but a coworker I had in the 80s uh, came to me, and I never have agreed with him, but he came to me and told me I should not start my own business, that I would never make it, and that he felt like I never had original ideas, and that to him, most of the stuff I was making was, copying other people. And it was a devastating blow. And I hadn't started my studio yet. And it took me a while to get over that. And I don't know, probably 4 or 5 years later, I realized that guy was mistaken. I have always felt like my work is unique, but that ended up being a gift, I think, because he made me really work hard at having pieces that didn't look like other people's. And so that experience shaped me too.
I know a little bit about your creative process, and you dedicate pretty much a month every year into developing designs. Can you tell us about that a little bit more?
Well, for me, coming up with new work, um, for me, involves experimenting. And in glass blowing, that's really expensive thing. Um, it's not like a piece of paper you write a story on and then throw it out. There's fuel burning, there's people that you're paying. It's really hard to find the money and time to do experimenting, but it became such a priority for me. And what I do is to try to set up experiments with glass where I don't know what's going to happen. And I feel like as long as I'm doing that, there's a really good chance that what I do will be unique, because most of my experiments go horribly. No matter, even though I've been working with glass for like almost 40 years, most of the time it doesn't go well. And that can be sort of hard to live with, but I've also felt like if things aren't going well, either it means it's a really stupid idea, or it means that I'm on to something that's close to the edge somehow, and this is worth pursuing. It's like if my glass shop was in a valley surrounded by mountains, I could stay in that glass shop and keep trying to come up with new ideas, or and I or I can go over the hill and see what's over there, because I have no idea what's over the hill. And if I don't know where I'm going to be surprised. And when glass surprises me, which it does regularly, that is one of my favorite things. And it still does stuff that, oh my gosh, look what it just did. I had no idea it could do that. I don't think it's like too many other materials.
That's so cool. And I think it's also just a testament to how unique your work can be since you spend so much time exploring.
Yeah. And actually, I actually got in 2018, I was starting to get burned out, and mostly on running a business. And so in 2019, I took all the cash I had available in my business account. And I told the folks that work for me, like, I told my galleries, like, I'm going to take 3 or 4 months and just experiment. And, it's very expensive, but it really worked. I started really loving glass blowing again and remembered why I like it so much. And yeah, the experimenting stuff, I just think it's so much fun. And well, I mean, it can be heartbreaking too, but um, I'm so engaged all the time. Like when we make stuff for a day and it doesn't come out right, by the time I go to bed, I'm like all excited to go again the next day because I know ways we can tweak it. And tomorrow we'll do it this way and then it'll work. So, yeah.
Okay, so I want to back up just a little bit because I had the pleasure of getting a tour of your studio, and I just want you to describe it. And I also want you to describe the thought process on how you got it all set up, because I think the flow is a really interesting concept.
Yeah. So this barn is 40 by 60 feet footprint, and it has 3 floors in it. It's just pretty big place. And I am so glad I spent my first 10 years in my own shop, building everything in my shop, because over that 10 years, what I mostly found out is what I did not want to do again. By the time I built this shop, I had learned like that doesn't work and that doesn't work and that doesn't work. It was great to have that experience. And so when I designed this place, I actually wanted to have a flow, like you said, of on the first floor, we do the hot glass work. And then you bring the work up the stairs to the second floor. And right there is the grinding area. And then it goes from one side of the room where the grinding is over to the other side of the room where the shipping and packing is. And then it goes out on the other side of that room out to UPS. So the flow is nice. And something I learned from Josh, working at Josh's, was as he got bigger, there were people who were in the office who had the same work schedule as me, but I never saw them. And I didn't like that. And so when I built this shop, I wanted everybody in the building to be able to talk to everybody else. And if you have to hear the grinder running, that's part of the business. I'm not going to build like a soundproof room so you can do office work. And so every room has a window into the next room. And so people can yell at us downstairs and we can yell back, and it's all sort of fun. And yeah, I really enjoyed designing the shop. And downstairs, I have three glory holes and a big furnace, and I've got 4 annealers, that we built, and it's all, under a hood. And I loved driving around before I built it, going to other people's shops and getting a feel for what worked in terms of ventilation. And I also was lucky enough to trade with a gentleman in our town who was an engineer, and he was able to help me figure out how much ventilation I needed to make the place a safe place to work. So, he was able to tell me, you need a fan that can pull this many CFMs through the shop every minute in order to have a good exchange of air. And so I was pretty pleased with how it all came out.
And it was an old apple barn, right?
Right. And I don't know why for an apple barn they put down such a beautiful wooden floor, but they did. I'll take it.
And 2 parts of the flow that I like too. You work on how you get your glass in, all your raw materials in, so it all comes in from the front, right?
That's
And then it
right. Yeah.
goes into the
That's part of the
batch.
flow too. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then
At my old shop, I've always used spruce pine batch from the very beginning. And my old shop, I had to take them off the semi one bag at a time and then bend over and haul them back under this little lean-to thing. And I was like, I am not doing that the rest of my life. So yeah, so the truck pulls up and we can use a pallet jack and get everything off the truck. And yeah, then the batch room was right there. So boy, I'm impressed by your observations.
Okay, but wait, and then tell us about the third floor.
The
The
third floor.
attic is the coolest part.
Yeah, I guess I took you up there, huh? The third floor is basically just a big open space, and I've got a lot of seconds up there. And the folks that work for me also have glass stored up there. I have lumber up there, and I also have. It's where we keep our packing materials, and so I also have a big hopper full of the cornstarch peanuts, and those just go from the third floor and come down into the second floor, right above the packing area. So,
Okay, that's cool.
It's so cool. And it's like a graveyard of quote unquote seconds.
yeah,
Like the history of everything. Oh, it's so beautiful.
because I don't draw much, and so when I make stuff and I'm doing experiments, basically they're my sketches. And so it's really hard for me to part with them because it might have some little idea that might work itself into a piece 10 years from now. And I'm so afraid I'm going to forget that little idea if I throw it out. So I tend to hang on to stuff a little bit too long.
So when you are coming up with new designs, are you just letting the glass kind of do its thing? Because I know you said you're really experimental, or you don't draw them out? Like,
Sometimes I do, but not very often. Usually I come into the shop with a list. Let's try this, and this, like Don knows from taking my classes, like just crazy stuff. Like what happens if we change the angle of the marver so that it's not parallel with the floor, or, just crazy things, and let's see what happens. And that will lead to something. I guarantee it. And it will probably surprise you. Or another thing that I do is make up my own tools and techniques. I feel like if everybody's using the same optic molds in the country, then it's going to be hard to come up with a unique thing that's not like everybody else who's using optic molds. And so, I made my own optic mold, and but often the ideas can start from leaves and plants. Not that I just want to capture the essence of a leaf or a plant. I don't really want to make a leaf that looks exactly like a leaf. Partly because I wouldn't be that good at it. And secondly, because I would rather try to find something in the glass that's new. I don't know. It reminds me of. It's like discovering what's in the glass that we haven't found yet. And it reminds me of those sculptures of Michelangelo where he only half finished them, and so there are these people that they're still buried in the rock. I forget what they're called, but he only got halfway through. So you can see like those people were in those blocks of rock, and he had to discover them in there. And I feel that way about the glass. Like there's stuff in there. If we just dig around enough, we will find something unique.
Can you talk a little bit more about your family and what part, if any, they play in the business? I think your wife's a farmer too, so doesn't that kind of all come around again?
Yeah. I mean, we have a huge vegetable garden. We eat out of it pretty much every day of the year because we can a lot. But my wife and my two children have no interest in my business or glass blowing. Sort of funny. but it's fine with me too. Yeah. But yeah, family is pretty important. And now I have a grandson, and I had no idea how much joy that would bring, but it's really an amazing experience to be around him. He's 3.
I didn't really realize your upbringing coming from like a family of farmers, and your glasswork makes so much more sense now because it is all so nature based. And
Yeah.
yeah, you can,
And also the work ethic. Like my grandfather was a dairy farmer. So dairy farmers, they work almost around the clock. And you have to milk the cows twice a day. You don't have a choice. And when the furnace is going, I better go check on it because it's going all night. And if it shuts off in the middle of the night, I can't wait till the morning to fix it. I got to go over there in the middle of the night. And yeah, I've often felt like I'm a glass farmer. I think anybody who has their own shop, that is sort of the way it is. You got to be on it all the time.
yeah, the furnace baby. Got to
Yeah.
keep it fed,
Yeah.
moving. Can you tell us a little bit about how you run your business? I know in the past you said that sometimes you end up working with a lot more assistants, and then there's been periods of your life where you kind of scale it down. Can
Yeah.
you give us some insight on that?
Well, it's been like a arc. Um, like when I started, I was by myself and I did everything. And then little by little, I worked up to the point where I had like 5 people helping me, and most of them were part time. And then the last like 5, 8 years, I have started to scale it down to try to figure out how to have more time away from the shop. And it's been a challenge to make a business smaller because that goes against what businesses are supposed to do. And it's been an interesting experience. And when I started my business, there were really only 2 ways to make a living. You could make your stuff. I'm probably wrong about that, but that's seems to be right. Is that you could make your work and take it to a craft fair and sell it retail, or you could make your work and take it to a wholesale show and have galleries order it. That's about it. And so it was easy for me to make a decision between those two. In terms of a family life, having wholesale work and not having to travel around was the right choice. But now there are so many ways to make a living as a glassblower that were not available when I started. And, I sort of hung in there doing the wholesale thing for all these years, longer than lots of other people. And um, COVID, I think, maybe has been the kiss of death for lots of galleries. I mean, the number of galleries has gone down, 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 down the past 8 years, and now they're really having a hard time. And so the COVID has made me like become more internet oriented, which I never wanted to do, but here we are.
Can you touch a little bit on how you price your work?
I hate it. I mean, I think pricing work and deciding whether something is a second or a first are really difficult for me. And it's pretty easy for me to price work using math, figuring out how much a piece costs for me to make. You can do that just with math and taking stats. But then the other kind of pricing is what I don't know how to do. I've never been comfortable with, which is like, but what is that piece worth outside of how long it took you to make? And I don't know. I don't know if I can have a good answer for that. I don't have a good answer for that. It's been one of the challenges of my career, and I just love to keep learning, and so my pieces became more and more complicated, and that actually takes a whole different type of marketing that um, I wasn't prepared for, and I'm just not that good at. I'm fine with marketing, sort of low end stuff to galleries, but bigger pieces that should be more expensive, um, it's not my strength, and so that's been a challenge.
You said before that you were kind of burning out of glass for a little bit and you had to step back and explore. And you also said that you're a hard worker and that you're kind of just always in the mindset to work, it seems. Do you find that you wake up some mornings and you have slumps, or do you have days
Yeah,
where you can't do it?
that's what was happening that year. But there were days when I just didn't want to do it, and I'm prone. I've struggled with depression since I became an adult, and you know I I'm not a total believer in trying to totally get rid of things that you were born with, because I feel like that depression was trying to tell me something. It wasn't like one of those dips where that we all have where you're just not into it for a few days. This went on for months, and I knew that it was telling me, Ed, you got to make a change. Otherwise, you're going to feel like this the rest of your life. And so I'm really grateful for depression sometimes. And so it forced me to make some changes and do some things that were really risky financially. But I know during that stretch, I never went to art school. And while I was making these experiments and I had no goal of trying to make something that was going to make a lot of money or make something that had to go to a gallery, I was just making it because I wanted to. And I had never really had that experience before for a long stretch. And sometimes I felt like, wow, I'm doing art school. Finally, when I'm 62, I'm doing art school. I don't really know if that's true, but it felt that way sometimes. Just like if somebody gave you a whole bunch of money and you could just play around with the glass for a year, man, what a gift that would be.
Thanks for sharing that part of yourself. That's something we all struggle with. And it's just so nice to hear that other people struggle with it too.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny how in the beginning I had no trouble getting up in the morning. It was so exciting to get the shop going, and I worked. When the kids were little, we'd have dinner at 6, and I'd hang out with them until 8 or 8:30 or 9 until they went to bed, and then I would go back to the shop till midnight. And I did that for like 10 years straight. And I don't think I would have made it if I didn't do that. And to come full circle, remember in the beginning I said I left behind another career of possibly doing some social work, and that part of that year of depression, that was something else I learned, is that maybe I should go back and try that. And so a year and a half ago, almost 2 years ago, I work now about 12 hours a week in a crisis center as a counselor. And it's really been great. It has, that's a whole different part of my brain than the glass shop. And, when you make a beautiful piece of glass and you send it to a gallery and then they sell it to somebody, you never know how much it meant to that person. You never meet that person. It can feel pretty hollow. And uh, I, through my whole career, I'm always doubting the validity of doing what we do. Is it really worth it? Or, where glass blowers are definitely causing climate change, and that's bothered me from the very beginning. but is what we're doing really making a difference in the world? And when I talk to people who have my work in their house, then I do feel like, oh, yeah, maybe we are helping people be happier or teaching people about beauty. Or lots of times, if I make a piece and I see some combination of colors or some curve that really speaks to me, what it often does is help me see the world better. Like, and then I look at leaves in a different way. And I love that about art. But the social service job is so great to be able to help people and make a difference and realize I am making a difference. There's no doubt about it. And so it's been a good thing. It's sort of rounded out my part of my personality that needed some work.
Like maybe some connection with others.
Yeah.
Mm.
And so I used to have some guilt about coming and making glass and but I don't, that's gone now, which has been great for that burden to have been lifted off of me. To feel like, well, I spent 12 hours this week helping people. That feels so good. Now I can go make some glass and maybe it'll help people.
What about teaching? I know that you did do a
Um,
good number of teaching gigs, and
yeah,
how does that work into your life?
uh, that's been a great thing. It's really scary to teach. But when I realized about 7, 8 years ago that, oh, I think I actually have a process to share. And no, I'm not a master glass blower. I'm not like a master Italian glass blower. I don't know all of the techniques, even though I've taken classes with Lino. But I'm a master of my own techniques. And I'm fine with sharing all that stuff with people. And it's been a great thing to watch to try to get people to um, sort of get out of the idea that there's a certain way to do everything and try to remember to approach glass as a beginner and be okay with making mistakes. I think mistakes are the only way you grow and find unique things. And I love sharing that with people. And I'm at the point where I'll share anything I've learned with anybody.
Is there a difference in your mindset when you go into work, a typical work day for you, or when you're going to teach a class?
Uh, yeah, it's really different. When I'm going into work and we're just making production stuff, um, it's all about setting up I don't have to think about what I'm going to say today. We just work, and I'll get into the shop and prep stuff. Have the colors set out and turn on the equipment and try to get things set up. But sometimes what I spend the most time doing is putting together a really good playlist for the day, because music is, I would die without music, and we have it on all day. And when you're making stuff that we all know how to make, music is so important. But when I'm teaching, I'm really trying to figure out what are we going to experiment with today. And I get in there early and do a lot of prep and try to figure out what am I going to say to people today. Um, yeah, teaching is more like a day to day experience. It's exhausting. It amazed me the first few times I did it how exhausting it was.
Can you tell us a little bit about what happens when you're also a boss? So when you're working with new people, you have to teach them in a way too. Has that been a hard experience?
Um, sometimes, I ask when I hire somebody, I ask them to please try it the way I do it. And then I am totally open to hearing your ideas about how maybe we could do it better. But I really like to have a shop where everyone feels comfortable about making input, especially when we're doing experimenting. I'd like to know like what they're thinking also. And we have talks about originality and whose idea is this going to be? Is it going to be my idea? Is it going to be your idea? Or does that matter? And I just love it when we're experimenting. And I mean, my shop becomes a disaster when I'm experimenting. And those quotes that talk about how creativity comes out of chaos. I mean, I'm a good example of that because we can have the shop be so clean and neat. And when we're doing experimenting, by 10 o'clock, there's glass all over the floor and there's tools everywhere. And, I might be over grinding a piece of metal in the middle of an experiment because I need a new tool before we finish the piece. And it just gets crazy and I love it. And when we're done with a piece, often I'm drawing on the floor like how we could change it to make it better. And so are my assistants. They're drawing on the floor and we all look at things together. And I love that teamwork process. And I wouldn't want to be a boss that doesn't let people do that. And I have a hard time telling people what to do. I hope I try to hire people that I won't have to worry about that. So I've been lucky. I've had a lot of real, and I always have had people that work for me that are better than me at a lot of glass blowing. That I can learn from them. Also, then it's really great. Like I was trying to do a new piece a couple of years ago, and I knew what I wanted to do, and I tried it, and then one of my assistants, he was like, "I got an idea," and he did it so beautifully. It was great. So yeah, being a boss can be really taxing. Trying to keep everybody happy because one of my measures of success has there's money and survival. Those are all parts of success, but for me it's a whole bunch of other things too. It's like I want when all of us when we all go home at the end of the day, we've made some quality work and that we've all had some fun and we all feel like we did something important or skillful today, and people don't feel like the day was sort of meaningless and they just swept the floor all day. I want everybody to feel good about their day. So to me, that's more important than making money if we're all having a good time.
Do you ever struggle with putting your work out there?
Yep.
Do you have a way of kind of getting out of that, or?
Like, how do
No.
you know when a piece is done too?
Well,
Like,
that's another thing. It's like it's so hard to decide. And but what often happens with me is like I'm looking at pieces that are experiments and I feel like, boy, that could be a lot better. We need to spend another few weeks on that and then it'll be ready. And often you just can't do that. But often what I find is that if I take one of those pieces I thought was not quite ready and I bring them to a show, oh, it doesn't look too bad. Because here it's in my shop. It's like next to a grinding wheel or something. And there it's like got lights on it and pedestals and stuff. And I was like, oh, you know, just take it and put it out there. It'll look better than you think. Often I find myself saying that.
so one of my favorite questions is, if you could tell younger Ed something, what would it be?
Uh, to learn how to delegate a little bit more to employees I've learned how to do quite a bit of that, but not quite enough. And so that would be good. Another thing is about the growing part of an artist. That if growing and learning are a part of your life if that's important to you, then your work is going to change, and that's going to change your business. And just be ready for that. But otherwise, I don't think I would change a whole lot of the way I went about it. I wish I wish we didn't have to work. I didn't have to work as many hours, and you know that, Dom. But that's the way it is.
That makes perfect sense, though. Like, you can have a successful business and you could keep running it in that successful way, but then you're not leaving yourself room to grow and change. And then as you grow and change, your whole business changes.
It does. And that year when I had a hard time, it's like I realized, like, hey, yeah, I could keep the business going just the way it is. It's successful. It's supporting itself, but had become stale, and I couldn't live with it. So we needed to mix things up, and then COVID hit right after that. So who knows what's going to happen?
Nothing like kicking up the stagnant energy, right?
Yeah, it forced my hand into electronic selling and marketing.
It also forces you to count your blessings, though.
I
If that's the
know.
worst of our troubles, then we can live with it.
Yeah, I feel so much for. I am so lucky that my career span happened when it did. Um, I feel for young glass people who are trying to start a business like right now. It'd be so hard, and I think it's hard to start a business in glass right now anyway. But if COVID had happened when I was in my 40s and we had 2 children at home, and my business was supporting the whole family, I would have months and months ago, I would have had to go get another job or just totally switch careers. So for COVID to come along when I'm 63 is not bad for me. I mean, I do feel lucky and grateful that I had quite a few decades of pretty smooth sailing in terms of business. But I'm always for humility, and COVID reminds us that we're just human beings, and we're not in charge all the time.
That's for sure.
Seriously.
It's easy to forget that, though.
What's your parting words, Ed? Give us parting
man.
words of wisdom.
Honesty and humility. I think those are the 2 most important things in life. Oh, and I know for one of my big themes is that you have to be yourself. You should not run a business the way somebody else did, and you should not make art the way other people do. I mean, you just have to learn how to make your business run in a way that matches your personality. And the same with art. You've got to make your own. That's your best shot at having something unique, is looking at yourself and saying, how do I work with this material that's my own personal way of working with it? So thank you for having me.
Good ending.
I'm
Thank
flattered.
you so much for giving us all your time.
Yeah. You're welcome.
Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of Connected in Glass. Make sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram for more information on the artists we interview and for updates on the podcast.